Hey, I'm Q Paul, and welcome to lesson 16 in our series. If you remember, and well, hopefully you do, in the last lesson we covered the verb estar, which is one of the ways to say to be. Well, today we're going to cover the other one, which is ser. Today I'm only going to be showing you how to conjugate this one in the present tense. So let's start with the first and second person like we usually do. Yo soy, I am, tú eres, you are. And as usual, you can leave off the yo and the tú. Unlike most of the verbs where we just stop at the first and second person conjugations, it's useful to know this one in the third person singular and third person plural. So here they are, es for singular and son for plural. Here they are all together, soy, eres, es, son. We use ser when we want to talk about origin, occupation, or permanent states and conditions. Let's start with origin. If you want to know where someone's from, you ask, ¿De dónde eres?, which literally means, from where are you? And you could say something like, Soy de los Estados Unidos. I'm from the United States. So if you want to say, I'm American, you would just say, Soy estadounidense. Now that's quite a mouthful, and actually you'll see that word a lot in the newspapers, but you won't hear it as much in the streets. You're more likely to hear americano or americana. Even Mexican people will ask me, ¿Eres americano? You'll also use ser to talk about occupation. For example, soy carpintero. I'm a carpenter. If it was a woman, she would say, soy carpintera. Remember, these have to agree in number and gender. They're adjectives. You'll notice we didn't translate the word a. We didn't say soy un carpintero. We just say soy carpintero. That's what Spanish does. Just use the verb, nothing in between, and then just attach the occupation. The exception to this rule is if you're adding other words to kind of describe or modify that profession. So you're not just saying, I'm a carpenter, you would say, I'm a good carpenter, or I'm an excellent carpenter. Then you're going to see that little un or una appear again. Soy un buen carpintero. Soy una buena carpintera. Ser is used to describe permanent states and conditions. If you remember, estar was for temporary states and conditions. When we're referring to people, that's going to be physical characteristics, race, things like that. Here are a few examples of adjectives that are commonly used with the verb ser. You'll notice that fat and thin are in there. Now, many beginning Spanish students say, well, those aren't necessarily permanent characteristics. The person could change. That's true. So think of it as permanent states or conditions or ones that are not easily changed. Now you may have noticed that I said that these adjectives are usually used with the verb ser, but they're not always. You may hear things like estoy gordo instead of soy gordo. So what's the difference? Well, you know that estar is commonly used for temporary states or conditions. So when you say something like estoy gordo, it means I'm fat today, or I must have eaten too much yesterday, or look, my pants are a little tight. This is something I may say after we spend about 3 days at an all-inclusive. Mírame, estoy gordo. Look at me, I'm fat. The reason I wanted you to learn the third-person singular and third-person plural of this is because you're going to be using this verb a lot to describe items and things. So it's permanent characteristics. We're talking about size and shape and color. Here are a couple colors in Spanish. Now obviously this list is not complete. The purpose of this video is to teach you when to use the verb ser, not teach you a bunch of new vocabulary words. However, I did include a more complete list at qru.us. Just go to the section on Spanish lessons. What I want to point out here is that colors are adjectives. That means they also have to agree in number and gender. Now look at this sentence. La camisa es azul y blanca. Now, camisa is the noun. So azul can be masculine or feminine, so we didn't have to change that one, but we had to change blanco to blanca to agree. Here are two useful plug-and-play phrases if you want to ask what color something is. De qué color es plus singular noun, and de qué color son plus plural noun. I always think it helps to see things in a sentence, so here you go. ¿De qué color es la casa? What color is the house? La casa es roja, blanca y verde. The house is red, white, and green. When you talk about the size of an item, you're going to use ser, because that's a permanent state or condition. La silla es grande, pero la mesa es pequeña. The chair is big, but the table is small. You may use ser and estar to describe the same item. It just depends what you're talking about. El carro es rojo. The car is red. That's pretty permanent. El carro está limpio. The car is clean. That's temporary. Not to confuse the issue, but there are a handful of adjectives out there that can be used with either ser or estar. Native Spanish speakers will debate back and forth which one they prefer, but you could really use either. The one you're most likely to encounter involves marital status. I'm married, I'm single, I'm divorced. You may hear estoy casado, I'm married, or soy casado. There's no real distinction. Another one you'll often hear involves being retired, and since these videos are directed towards retired people, I thought we'd talk about that one. So you may hear soy jubilado, which means I'm retired, but more like I'm a retired person, or estoy jubilado. I'm retired, meaning that's my status right now. The topic of deciding whether to use ser or estar is a really big one in Spanish, and a lot of beginning students struggle with it. When you get into these subtleties between the two, it can get very confusing. Over the last 2 lessons, we basically just hit the highlights and gave you some basic principles to follow. That's going to get you started and get you through most of the things you want to talk about. But if you're going to continue with your Spanish, you're going to have to eventually learn more. That's just how it works. Well, that's it for today. Hasta luego.